And it's not giving away any secret. It's the first and the most profound lie. It's profound because it starts at such a young age. And so the first lie is called the genetic fallacy. And the genetic fallacy, in essence, is that there is such thing as a natural born leader. That's a lie. There's no such thing as a natural born leader.
Today's guest is Trevor Bron, leadership coach, author, and founder of LeaderCore. Trevor has spent his career helping build strong leaders, healthier cultures, and more human-centered workplaces. He's also the author of The Leadership Lie and the 6 Secrets of Great Leaders. In this conversation, we discuss leadership myths, culture, influence, and what it takes to lead in today's world. Let's get into it.
This is Kobek on Air. CEO and co-founder Hisham Jalil built a workplace that people trust. Now he's interviewing other people-first leaders to explore what shapes them. Today's episode is brought to you by Kobek. We help people turn complexity into outcomes that matter. Stay tuned for more. The views expressed in this episode are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of their employer.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Trevor Bron. You're a world-renowned leadership coach, and you're also an author, an accomplished author. I read your book. Your latest book is, I have it right here, The Leadership Lie, The 6 Secrets of Great Leaders. It's a really good book, but I appreciate you coming on. So far I've had various leaders and only a few episodes come out, and you're a leader yourself, but, and some of them have started getting into coaching or have been in coaching, but this is, I would say you're, the professional coach. So it's nice to kind of have you on to get your perspective. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I don't know about the world-renowned part, but I mean, in my own mind, maybe.
Well, all the people that I've interviewed so far that know you have said really good things about you, and you've worked with a lot of them. So, kind of a full circle here. So, let's just jump in real quick because I liked your book. I mean, I don't want you to give away everything there, but, tell me about your book a little bit. It's the 2nd edition, right? It just came out in October.
Yep.
It's an easy read, which is kind of important, right? Because I think sometimes, sometimes some audiobooks could be 25 hours and you're like, man, how many car rides and gym workouts do I have to do to get this in? Yours is a lot easier to understand, easy to read. And I think that's important because leadership, while, it's hard to do, is actually a simple sort of concept a lot of times. So please tell me about your book.
Yeah. The book was really a culmination just of, years of, as you said, coaching people, working with organizations. And I don't really consider myself to be an author nearly as much as all of the other things I do in the leadership realm. But over the years, I just kept running into these fallacies, these lies, these myths about what it meant to actually lead. And it was frustrating. It was frustrating because the lies were so prolific. They perpetuated every organization that I was in, and quite frankly, it was keeping people from really stepping into the realm of leading. And so I set out to just write it down. I didn't intend necessarily to publish it in a book format. It was just I just needed to see if there is truth to what I was experiencing. And so the book is based on the 6 predominant lies that I believe are alive and well within, especially within the professional realm today. And it's not giving away any secret. It's the first and the most profound lie. Is profound because it starts at such a young age. And so the first lie is called the genetic fallacy. And the genetic fallacy, in essence, is that there is such thing as a natural born leader. That's a lie. There's no such thing as a natural born leader. And when we start hearing that lie, we're kids. We tell that lie to little kids, and then it just it grows over time. So what happens is, for every lie, there's a consequence, whether it's intended or unintended. So that the consequence of the first lie, the genetic fallacy, is if you don't fit the stereotype of what a natural born leader is, then clearly you're not a leader. which means we have just marginalized large swaths of people because the natural born leader does have a stereotype. They are middle upper class, they're white, they're tall, and they're men, and they're charismatic. And that just has such profound implications. And so having to walk that back and to talk about the reality is that leaders are made, they're not born. They are made out of a lifetime of circumstances, events, tragedy, trial, learning, failing. And we take those things and we learn how to apply them to become effective at not just leading people, but effective at living life. The most remarkable leaders are the most remarkably self aware. They know what's going on inside them, and they take that and then in turn have the ability to become socially aware, which is the crux of emotional intelligence. The book is a lot about emotional intelligence and the role that it plays in the life of a leader. So that's the first lie. There are 5 others. And for each lie, there's the corresponding truth or reality to it. And then there's the secrets that go with how do you do that? I think that's the practical part of it. How do you take this and make it really pragmatic? You read the book, so you know this. The first line in the book is, "This is not a leadership book." I don't read leadership books. Leadership books are filled with a lot of platitudes and philosophy and all of those things. And I know people who have read every leadership book that's out there, and they're horrible leaders. It doesn't translate oftentimes. This is a book about leaders, and so I make a distinction between leadership and leading. They're not the same thing. Leadership and leading are not the same thing.
Absolutely.
And so I'm glad to hear that you thought it was accessible and an easy listen or read. And then that means I accomplished one of my primary tasks there, was to make it accessible to people at all levels.
Yeah, very accessible. Well, but let's dive into this. Not leaders are not born necessarily, right? Let's dive into that, because that might be one of the biggest myths or lies. And I'm curious, is like, why is that? Because I think it is, like, it certainly is a thing that people think about. Like, I thought about it, previously. And when you think of, I mean, there's everyone has a lot of leaders that go through their minds. They're going through their minds right this moment. Like one person that stands out right away because of the charisma piece. So sure, there's like the race aspect and things like that, and there's other reasons for that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like charisma, or like a natural, if you will, ability, you look at, say, like a Barack Obama, who's a very famous leader and very well liked by many people, maybe not so much by others, but regardless, a well-known leader that was very charismatic, right? Bill Clinton as well, and like things like that. And I wonder, but then there are others aren't. But why did that lie start? Is it because some are and they just kind of, it stands out in people's minds? Or like, I wonder how that even happens in terms of specifically the natural gift or charisma piece.
Yeah. I think certainly that there are some more out in front, out loud leaders that we would, be able to point to. And there is a charisma certainly element to it. But when you think about the totality of the effective leaders in our world, most of us would probably not even be able to name them, because they're not the charismatic out front politician kind of individual. They are running the nonprofits, the service organizations. I had this thought driving the other day as I was watching a group of people work with a group of homeless people on the street in my city. And I thought, if you really wanted to see the quickest way for society to collapse, which there's lots of talk about, the end times, and we seem to be fascinated with our own destruction and, zombie apocalyptic movies and all of that. And I just thought, if you want to see the fastest way for a society to crumble, take all of the people who take care of the weakest people in our society away. Stop having people do elder care. Stop having people be nurses or doctors. Stop having them take care of orphans. Stop having them take care of homeless people. That would be the collapse of our society. These people who lead but they do it from behind. They don't do it from out front. But even using the example that you mentioned, the thing that Barack Obama and Bill Clinton have in common is, God, they both have really difficult childhoods. They were not born to privilege. Neither one of them were. And they rose to the level that they got to, not because of something being handed to them. They rose to the level because they took those life events, I believe, and used them in a way that forged them, that made them into the people that they were. They rose above situations and circumstance and family history and all of those things. And I think that that's a hallmark of most. One of the examples that I use in the book is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln shouldn't have, but by all standards, was not a natural born leader and should have never risen to the level of that he did, and to become, widely considered to be one of the best presidents that we've ever had. Was born in the woods, was, considered a backwoods kind of country bumpkin by most people, was not articulate, was not a good looking man, was not all of the stereotypical things. He did have a level of charisma, however, but I don't think that charisma came naturally to him. He one of the most famous speeches ever written or given, the Gettysburg Address. He thought so little of the address, he actually mentions that no one will remember what he said in the address, and also thought so little of it. It was he was scribbled on a piece of paper and he folded it up and put it in his hat. That was where he carried the speech. And, he didn't have that sense of, I'm out here to, be this profound, charismatic leader.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Actually, that's a really good point, because sometimes, all the points you made, the one that I'm keying in on is there's the people that are out front. They're on X, they're on TV, they're on whatever, and that makes you think that's what leadership means, because you see them, right? They're almost celebrities.
Yeah.
But yeah, that can't be all the leaders in the world, right? There aren't only like 20. So that makes a lot of sense. And you kind of alluded to humbleness as well, that I think is important. That goes back to the self-awareness. I mean, even if somebody thinks they're really smart and they're a genius, they invented something that turned them into a billionaire, that's one skill set. That does not mean you're a leader necessarily. And that's where other things come in. And you were kind of alluding to the difference between a manager and a leader. Managing is like managing processes and things, right? And outcomes and results. But your leaders is actually leading people. It's a human endeavor, which kind of leads to one of your other lies. I don't want to give them all away, but I do think this was important. This one is another one that really stands out to me. And you don't have to go into what you said necessarily in the book, but just the concept. So, title and position, and that, it's connected to leadership. Sometimes you're given a title or position because it could have a leadership expectation associated with it. But just because you have that position or title does not mean you're a leader. In fact, it probably means more that you're a manager, but talk to me about that, because you've done a lot of coaching, and I can imagine this comes up a lot, and where maybe someone is giving a position, but they're not necessarily yet trained to be a leader.
Yeah. God, that's such there's so many broad-reaching implications of that particular lie, especially in my realm. So a lot of the people that I work with, and it wasn't an intentionality on my part from, I'm going to go out and intend to spend my time coaching people in highly technical organizations, but that has mostly been my career. I've worked with a lot of people who are very, very technically smart, even brilliant people, whether they be, aerospace or computer engineers or IT people. But I've spent most of my career working with people who have a high level of technical proficiency. And in what's been true in all of those organizations, whether it's at the university level, private sector, government, in the FAA, what happens is they take people who are good at their job technically. They have a technical job. And they take those people and they promote them from the first technical job that they were good at to the next technical job. And they are good at that one and then the next technical job. And one day these people wake up and they got promoted into management, but they weren't ever prepared, equipped, or trained to be managers. So what happens is they step into the leading realm as a technical manager. And that is the part where they feel like, hey, my skill set is this, which is I'm technically proficient. So they start managing people like their tasks or like their things to be accomplished, stuff to check off of a list. And certainly there is an element of managing people that is that. It's doing the perfunctory stuff that every manager does. But if at some point they don't transition from being a manager of things into being a leader of people, then what they're doing is they're occupying a position of leadership without ever leading. It's like the person who drives in the fast lane below the speed limit. We've all worked for people who are in the position above us, in front of us, and we could clearly say this person's not leading, and it's frustrating. It's demoralizing to work for a quote unquote leader or a boss that is not leading. And so I come across this a lot and spend a lot of time talking about how do you make that transition from managing things to leading people and helping people understand what the difference is. And as you go up in the organization, leading people becomes more and more important and managing becomes less and less. And the distinction I make about that is I oftentimes people, talk about roles and responsibilities. We need to have a conversation about roles and responsibilities. Well, the first thing is that's code language for anything other than roles and responsibilities. It's our way of articulating, well, we need to talk about roles and responsibilities because you're not doing your job, or I don't like how you're doing your job, or you're trying to do my job. And so that's the language that we use. And so it gets clouded and we don't ever really grasp what those two words are about. So kind of succinctly put, every entry-level job, for the most part, is a job that is filled with responsibilities. That's all it is. You show up, you do task A, task B, task C, you just go through your day, and that's what it is. Almost all responsibility, no role at all. As you go up in an organization, your roles increase and your responsibilities go down. So by the time you get to be the CEO of an organization, you play a lot of roles, but you have almost no responsibility. Why? Because you have a bunch of people who have those responsibilities underneath you. If a CEO gets that wrong and they still believe they have a lot of responsibility and that's what they lean into, one, they're going to be deemed or marked as a micromanager. They're in the weeds. And two, they're going to have an organization that's adrift because the primary roles that CEO plays to cast vision, to set direction, to set tone. Those are all roles. They're not responsibilities. And so it just gets murky because we don't understand the distinction between the two. Being an effective leader is about living in to the manifestation of a role that you play, not the responsibilities that you have. But there's also a lie kind of built into that. And the lie is the higher you go, the more responsibility you have. We feel the burden of it. I have all this responsibility, this weight on my shoulders, and it's like I got executive decisions to make. The weight that you should feel is the weight of your role, not the weight of your responsibility. Because the most effective leaders, the higher up they go, the better they are at saying leadership is not about decision making. Leadership is about destination making. It's about saying, here's where we're going, and painting a picture of this place that you're trying to get to. And then instilling that within people around you who are willing and able and ready to get you to that destination because they believe in it too. And then you empower them to help you get to that. That's all about role. It's very little about responsibility. So I see this a lot in technical organizations where, if we told most people when they got promoted into management what management was really about, most people would probably never go into management. because basically, here's how I would describe it. Okay, you want to be a manager, you need to be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a family therapist. You need to be good at conflict resolution. And by the way, most of the time, people are going to be disappointed in you at some point. I mean, who wants to like? But that's the reality of the challenge of what it is, what it takes to do that. And but people who lean into it and realize, like you said earlier, it's not as though any of that is hard per se, because that's all learned skill. It's all learned behavior. I think anybody can do that. It's whether or not you're willing to uh, carve out the time and put in the effort to do that.
So say that those two things again. The responsibility, the weight. Say that sentence again. That has a lot of meaning. The role and responsibility, the weight shift there.
Oh, so the higher you go in an organization, the weight shift is you should feel the weight of the role that you play and less the responsibility that you bear. And most people get that opposite. We just think we have the burden of the responsibility of it all. And the great organizational leaders, almost any of them that you can point to, if not all of them, I would say, at least the ones I've looked at and studied many for the book, they get it. They understand that they play this enormous role within their organization. They know what they bring to everything. They know what they bring to every agenda, every meeting. Every time they enter into a space, they know this is the role that I play, and they don't walk out of meetings with more stuff to do, and that's hard for people to grasp. If you're leading an organization and you're walking out of all of your meetings and you've got more responsibilities, you're playing the wrong role.
Next week I'm gonna tell everybody I have no responsibilities thanks to Trevor.
You should.
No, I hear you, and I think I struggle with that a little bit myself. I think in a small business, I'm not trying to not put it on myself, but I do like, for example, I think it was Jeff Bezos. I want to say it was him, probably, where he was saying, now, like, say within the last few years, he's like, I don't work on anything right now. I work on the next year or two. And we have other group that does that. And I do think that'd be great to do. I do think it's a little bit harder in real life as a small business. Sure. I actually don't even have the luxury to do that sometimes. In a small business, you have to rally around these things. And so there's this idealistic world, and then there is the reality. And I think as a small business, or maybe in any size business, I don't really know, but I think it's a hard balance, and there has to be a way to either slowly or strategically be able to do that. In what you're saying, and I've struggled with it a little bit because of emergencies as a small business that we're constantly dealing with.
And I think that the challenge is the same no matter what size the organization is. And that is, when you are leading an organization, whether you're leading 5 people or you're leading 5,000 people, when the crisis comes, people look to you to see what your reaction is. Do you go into full on hyper micromanagement, get in the weeds kind of thing? Or do you provide and exude a sense of calm and stability and say, this organization exists because of our why. This is why we do this. And our circumstances are probably challenging right now, but we're still going towards this destination. You still set tone. You probably set tone more in a time or a year of crisis than you do in a year of success. And it's hard, especially when you're a small business, because you have to wear more than one hat. I own LeaderCore. I wear all the hats. Right. And it's not the first company that I've owned, and so I know what that's like. But being very intentional about saying, yes, there is some of the tyranny of the urgent that consumes. We lost a Doge contracts or a government shutdown or whatever it may be, and we have to deal with that crisis. And every once in a while, you have to stop and remind people we're still moving in the same direction. We're still the same company that we were before this happened. We're still trying to achieve the same things, and provide that sense of leading. to people, and that just means that sometimes you have to switch hats a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
For sure.
So, being a professional, world-renowned coach, leadership coach, I have a couple questions for you. Let's start with what drew you into that?
I ended up in this world a little bit on accident. This was not my intended realm. I have known in my life some really great people. Um, I hope that lots of us could say the same thing, that we have come in contact with greatness. um, I feel exorbitantly at an advantage there. I think I've encountered lots of great people, very kind, generous people, and in my late 20s, I was owner of a small business, and uh, some of these remarkable people that I knew came to me and said, "Hey, we're doing this thing that we think you would be really good at. Would you be willing to consider joining us?" And they were just starting out doing it. And initially, I said no. They wanted me to move to the East Coast. I'm a I'm a Denver. I'm a mountain guy. I'm not an East Coast guy. And they wanted me to move to the East Coast, and I didn't feel at that point in my life that wanted to do that. But I was flattered. I was honored that they would think that about me. And so I continued to do what I was doing for a while, and then they approached me again and said, "We really want you to do this, and so we don't think you need to live on the East Coast. We think you can stay where you are." And so I took a risk, left what I was doing, and went to work for these remarkable individuals who taught me a great deal, not about coaching and facilitating, and while they certainly taught me all those things, they really just taught me to be an astute observer and student of people. And they felt like I had some skills in that area already, and so they took a chance on me and brought me into the organization. And I started predominantly coaching in the nonprofit world, coaching and working with nonprofit organizations. That was my background, which was rewarding. Every nonprofit organization needs somebody to come alongside and help them, but none of them have money to do it. So it was a hard way to make a living. And I did that for a number of years, and then got enticed away from that for a bit to go work at a startup company, again by some remarkable people that I knew. And so I did that for a couple of years. Unfortunately, that organization did not survive, to my great chagrin, and um, my inability to coach them. They didn't want me to coach them. Matter of fact, I was told one day, "We didn't hire you to be our consultant." And my response was, "Well, you should have, because this thing isn't going to survive." So I left, and remarkably, uh, I went back to the group of people who had brought me into the coaching consulting world to begin with, and I said, "Hey, can I come back?" And I'll never forget what the CEO of the company said. It was one of the most humbling and honoring things that at that point in my life I'd ever been told. And he said, "I'd be stupid not to hire you back."
Hmm.
It was such a kind thing for them to do. I did my best to leave well, and all those things that you should do. Anyway, so I came back, and I had the audacity to ask. They said, I really I want to come back. Can I do something other than work in the nonprofit world?" And they said, "Yeah, of course." And so I thought that meant that I would go to doing work in the private sector in the business world, where they had clients. I ended up doing government work,
That's also
which
not nonprofit, basically.
yeah, no, it's somebody else's money. It's always somebody
Right.
else's money.
That's true.
So I started working. My first government client was the Federal Aviation Administration, which for the bulk of my career has been the largest organization that I've had. It's the largest organization I've worked with. I've done more work there than anywhere else, but that's led to doing work in predominantly in government and higher ed, which was kind of also unusual. I work with a lot of universities.
You said by accident, and I'm glad you did that, because I was going to say it's okay if it was by accident, because that's actually a common theme.
Yeah.
Not for, I think for the most part, for the people we've talked to, and not, it's not that they didn't want to do certain things. It's just where they ended up, and then finding something that they truly, love and gives them that feeling, right? And so that's pretty cool. I actually it kind of ties back to the leadership versus management thing a little bit, because like for myself, I did not know what government contracting, I didn't know what the government, I didn't know how they operated, right? And
No. Well,
sometimes you end up
sometimes they don't either.
well, fair enough. Somebody there hopefully does. I mean, I know our FAA friends are pretty good at that, but you think you're going to go somewhere. I wanted to be in the stock market, right? I love stocks.
You
I
did?
used to read, yeah, I used to read
Oh.
like Warren Buffett, all this kind of stuff. And we're just fascinated by the concept of owning a share of a business and investing and that kind of stuff. And then one of my cousin's husband at the time was very successful at that. And I was talking to him. He said, "Are you sure you want to go to New York and work 90-hour weeks? See like what you see in the movies?" He's like,
Yeah.
they're going to burn you out. This like your dream is not really what it feels like. And that made me kind of like look around a little bit. And then somehow I ended up working for a government contractor, not knowing anything. But then when we started the business, me and my business partners and friends at the time, this is going back to the leadership versus management thing. We simply just wanted to create a place where we wanted to work. We wanted to build our own thing. And it's really that simple. I just want to work somewhere I want to work, that hopefully other people want to work at. But that doesn't mean I had any sort of leadership capabilities or I wasn't a natural born leader. There's no such thing, right? But I was also not trained in any kind of way. And I think over the years, been in the business since 2007, I've learned a lot. I unfortunately probably didn't spend enough time early on learning about it, because again, I thought it was just something you pick up, and I end up picking up things. But it became an interesting thing over time, as you see that it's not just because you start a business online and you incorporate and then you find a client eventually does not mean you're a leader. You have a business. There's money coming in and out, mostly out, but that doesn't make you a leader. So it's just interesting how over time, and I don't even know if I'm probably not a good leader, but I want to be, and I want to learn more about it, and I'm trying to learn and be better, and I try to change things about myself, that approach things differently to try to be a better leader. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
See, all the things that you just said are an indicator that you're leaning into it. You just said all of the key indicators that I would look for to say, is this person on the leading track? Are they? You're being intentional about it. Whether you have a lot of time to be intentional about it it's at times inconsequential. Are you just being at all intentional about it? Are you putting yourself into a space where you recognize, hey, maybe I'm not a good leader? The hallmarks of everybody I've ever worked with, I'd be in a room full of people and I'll say, okay, everybody raise your hand. Don't shout out any names, but raise your hand. How many of you worked for a bad boss? Everybody raises their hands. We have all worked for a bad boss. We have all been a bad boss. I have been a bad boss. I have been a bad person to work for. The really bad bosses don't know that. The bad leaders don't know that they're not leaders. So anybody who's willing to admit, I'm not a great boss, I'm not a proficient manager, I'm not a good leader, but I'm willing to step into the space of becoming better, of working on it, of hiring a coach, reading some books, listening to a podcast, finding mentors. It's I write in the book, we spend 164 billion with a B billion dollars a year in America on leadership development.
Wow.
If that was effective, if that was a good $164 billion spent, we would have leaders coming out of our ears. I mean, we would be surrounded by people who we could identify as leaders. And the problem is we're not. because what happens is we take these people and we put them through leadership development, and then we dump them back into organizations and systems that don't honor leaders, don't want leaders, don't know what to do with leaders, aren't developing leaders internally, have horrible culture, all of those things. And so that's not the mechanism by which that happens. The way that we develop leaders is you have somebody who leans into it. They take this life that has forged them into who they are, and they in turn instill that to somebody else. Leaders make leaders. People like me, I get the opportunity to come alongside a lot of people and do that. And I would hope that my ability to coach and to guide and facilitate and do all of those things comes because I am a leader, not because I am well versed, not because I am well read, but because I intentionally step into this space. And then there are some people like you who then go out and they start organizations like yours. They start Quebec. And I don't know much about you, but I know enough about you and about your organization to know that you didn't just create a company. You created an ethos. Quebec has a feel to it. I've been in your space. I've been in your workspace. It has a feel to it. The people who work there have a feel to them. You have created a culture within that space. And as the founder or CEO of your organization, that's a role that you play. You create the culture. And, there's every organization has three kinds of, every existing organization has three kinds of culture. Legacy culture. Legacy culture was developed, in existing organizations by people who are probably no longer around. And most people don't have any connection to them. And sometimes that legacy culture, it's usually it's neutral. It's usually not negative. You think about great examples of legacy culture, like the Ford Motor Company. It's got great innovative legacy culture because, Henry Ford didn't obviously, create the automobile. He just revolutionized how the automobile was created. His invention was the assembly line. But there were so many more inventions to that. He invented the charcoal briquette.
Oh, wow.
The reason he invented the charcoal briquette was because they had all of this excess, material from building cars. And he's like, this is waste. What can we do with this? That was where the charcoal briquette came from. So it's just this great legacy culture of innovation. And so that's the first kind of culture. So even the FAA has got legacy culture. If you've ever been in the headquarters facility of the FAA on the 10th floor, you can they've got this kind of circular lobby space, and you can actually walk around, and it kind of documents the legacy culture of the agency. It's kind of fun. That's the first kind of culture. The second kind of culture is shadow culture. Every organization has shadow culture. Shadow culture is the culture that you know it when you run into it. It's discouraging to people. It's frustrating. It's bureaucracy. That's not the way we do things here, or we can't do that way, or we're not like that, whatever it may be. It's these things that it's sometimes hard to articulate for people, but they know it when they see it. They know it when they run into it. Every organization has shadow culture. The third kind of organization, or third kind of culture, kind of goes in two ways. The third kind of culture is either default culture, meaning you don't pay any attention to the culture. So it just is what it is. It develops over time. If you don't pay attention to it, you have a culture. It's default culture. Default culture always appeals to the lowest common denominator in that organization. It doesn't raise people up. It placates people and oftentimes pulls them down. So it will have manifestations of toxic culture or hostile work environments. There's lots of great organizational examples out there, who historically have just, had horrible default culture, where, they can't hire people fast enough by the measure of how they lose them. And it's because they have default culture, and it's discouraging to people. The other fork in that road is you could have design culture. And that is where you as a leader and the leaders in your organization say, we want people to experience something by working here. We want it to be a positive experience. We want them to feel like this is a place where they belong. They have a part here that they can contribute, and they know very specifically what they can contribute. What do they bring that they can give to the organization that they work for, and that they can make a difference, that what they're doing matters. If that is the work that's being done, then you have designed culture. You're combating default culture, you're putting shadow culture at bay, and you're probably trying to lean into the best positive parts of legacy culture. That all rolls up into this intentional culture that we create. So to tie that back to leading, great leaders build great culture, and great culture builds great leaders.
Mm.
That's how that life cycle works. And you'll note that in that life cycle, there is no leadership development. There's no sending people to a conference, which I now just made a bunch of people mad who do leadership development.
Let's cancel some conferences. No, yeah.
Yeah.
I see your point.
So,
that's very profound.
Yeah, and that was I admit it in the book. I'll readily admit for a long time I have been the benefit, financially and otherwise, of a lot of leadership development money. And about 6 or 7 years ago, the people I was working with at the time were talking about there's got to be a better way to do this, because we're going into organizations and we are pouring our heart and soul into developing people into leaders, and they're getting it. You can see the light bulb go on, and you can see them get excited about it. And you can see them, that you can see the door open, and they go, "Oh my gosh, this is more than just about managing tasks and all this stuff." You see, and so you see it, and they afterwards they share with you, "This has been a life altering experience. I love this." And and then 6 months later, you see them again, and it's like somebody popped their balloon and stole their lollipop and sucked all the air out of the room. And you're like, "What happened?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I went back to the company I work for, and they don't care." And so we then embarked upon a journey of saying, we need to help organizations run on 2 tracks at the same time. The first track is culture development. How do we help you develop a culture that people want to work in, that it is not drudgery, that it matters, that there is a clear destination? So how do we help an organization design culture? And then how do we develop leaders within that design culture, or attract leaders with them to come to work in that culture? And if organizations are willing to run on those 2 tracks, their success rate, the value to dollars spent, is astronomical. And ironically, the first place that we really embarked upon this journey was in the air traffic organization of the FAA, which was a remarkable test case experience, because that is a hard driving place to work. It was remarkable. They did a great job.
A lot of smart people, and
Very smart people.
Strong mission. And I was talking to Mr. Nick Fuller, who's a current acting deputy COO, and I think I talked to Chris Wilbanks, who's the VP of AJV at the moment. Similar thing, it's a place where you have a really, really important mission. People can't die, and they got to get to their destination as safely as possible. It's interesting to me to have a responsibility like that, a role like that, or just as an organization, and then balancing that out with leadership and management and all that stuff. It's very interesting. By the way, you said something interesting. You said a lot of things that are interesting, but one, you have a lot of good sayings. So one is, great leaders make a great culture, and then great culture makes great leaders. And I can talk to that with Kobeck, because what's interesting is, we have the legacy culture. Some people left, some people stayed. But I do think we have a design culture. I'm not trying to, this is not an ad for Kobeck, and I'm sure there's negatives out there too. But where I'm seeing that, as you were saying that, is what happens is, when we look deeper than what people may think about a culture, is when you see the true culture. And what I mean by that is, there's a certain period of time leading up to COVID that were better growth years, better outcome years from a results standpoint, right? The typical business measures, right? And what that does is it gives you resources. And then with resources, you can do stuff. So you can have a fun environment, you can buy stuff, you can go on trips, you can do stuff. And then, you wonder, like, is that the culture? Is that are we just spending money on our people? And is that part of our culture? And then you go into a COVID, and then now, even till now, not as much growth, tougher times. But what's interesting is the culture is not the fun part, and we still have fun, but the underlying piece of it is still there. So maybe we don't have all the resources to go on a million trips or do whatever, but that wasn't really the point of that. There's something else to our culture. For example, once a year, we would do this thing called the Quebec Collective. We bring people in. We have 100, let's say 100 people. It was a little bit more back then. Fly them in, right? Because half to 60% are not in the DC area. They're California and wherever, right? Seattle, you name it. So we fly everybody in for 3 days. We don't bill for those 3 days. So it's all overhead. We do fun things, team building. We do happy hours. We go to a baseball game, all this stuff. Really good time, right? But then I realized, I was like, I don't think anybody is sticking around for a once a year, fun time, right? It's every other day that really matters, right? Because if you hate your job, you hate your boss, you hate people you work with, you're not going to stick around so you can come to DC and do some team building, right? And a happy hour. So there's something else. That other part is just a part that we get to get together and celebrate each other and get to know each other. But the deep culture is actually something underneath. So anyway, that's to your point.
Yeah, it's the daily experience that really matters. It's like, and you think about it, the daily experience is horrible. Speaking personally, if I would hate it, the last thing I want to do is fly to DC for 3 days to hang out.
That's a good point.
Feel like that, then it just becomes this company meeting that I have to go do. But if it's the culmination of this is a group of people I love to work with, and yes, I would love to go spend 3 days, hanging out. Then that says a lot. I think one of the things that the pandemic did was it did something from an internal culture standpoint that we couldn't do, that a company couldn't recreate or do in another way. And that is, if people worked in a horrible culture work environment and a pandemic happens and we send them all home to work and they realize, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't miss being there at all. I don't miss those people. I would rather do this. I would rather be by myself. I would rather work, in some room in my house that was, never intended to be a workspace. It was a very clear indicator that a lot of people came out of environments, cultures that were toxic. And then when the talk came back to go back, people rebelled. They're like, why would I do that? Why would I go back and work in this horrible culture? But there were some places, we didn't hear many of them, but there were places where it was like, yes, I want to go back. I miss those people. I miss that environment. Now, there weren't many, but there were some. And I work with an organization here in Colorado that is that place. They have a remarkable internal culture. They're the leader of their organization he's a brilliant culture leader expert. I don't even know why I coach him. Oftentimes I think he's coaching me. He has created a place where people want to work. They have almost no turnover. People don't leave. They're provided for well, but they could make more money someplace else. And so the pandemic happened and there was loss. They felt loss. A lot of us initially felt loss, certainly. But they continued to feel loss. And so when the opportunity came for them to come back to work, they did not have a problem. They did not have widespread rebellion. They didn't have people say, nope, if I can't work remote, I'm not. They didn't lose people. It was such a great example of what can be in an organization. Now, don't get me wrong. I think all of us, even if we worked in organizations that had great culture, there was an autonomy and a freedom. And we see where that's kind of balanced out, where it's like 3 days in the office and maybe 2 days at home, where we've kind of reintroduced kind of some semblance of that balance. But the organizations that have great culture, I think they just had a lot less resistance to the return to office.
Yeah. I mean, that
Um,
makes sense. Man, I'm going to have you on again because there's like a whole 2 pages that I didn't get to. So no, I'm serious. And there's a whole section of things about your experiences as a coach. So I definitely want to have you on, but let me give you some questions that I've been kind of reusing, just so I can get
mhm.
the same question to different leaders to see, common themes and stuff, or just understand more about them. So let's start with this one. If you had a time machine, you can go back in time to a younger Trevor, whatever age, pick an age that you thought was a meaningful, teens, early 20s. What is one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I would go back to either high school or college. Um, and the thing I would want to tell myself is just be yourself. I didn't know for the longest time. I didn't know well into my probably early 30s, into my mid 30s, late 40s, who I really was. There was a lot of facade. There was a lot of image building. There was a lot of performance anxiety. There was
Mm.
convincing people that I was something that I wasn't. And it was, quite frankly, it was exhausting. I was burnt out at 28, jobless, in therapy, in group therapy, miserable, alone, afraid. And it took a pretty catastrophic life collapse in order to come to that realization. And I don't know if me going back and telling myself that I don't know if I'd have believed me. um, but that's what I would tell myself is, figure out who you really are and just be that. And, I am who I am today. You know, I, I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable with my life, and I I get to live an amazing life where I get to do the most remarkable thing possible, and that is to come alongside people and encourage them and guide them if I can, and hear their life stories, and it's amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Sounds like like something you've thought about before. If you had that experience, right? That's interesting. Very
yeah.
interesting. Trevor, how do you define success?
My definition of success is directly related to uh, my ability to connect and uh, change people's lives. I wake up every day believing that I can watch and experience life change happen right in front of me. And it's not always super grandiose life change, but just watching somebody grapple with something and they get it, and you see the light go on. And um, so success is, for me, is very much tied to the success of the people that I get to be around. And um, are they experiencing something about this life that they didn't know existed? So much of us spend so much time in confusion or discouragement, or maybe even depression, or um, feeling demeaned, or I so somebody I gave a guest lecture to a undergraduate class at a university in the fall, and I just got a note actually in the mail yesterday from the professor of that class, and she had asked for feedback of the students of the semester. They had brought in a bunch of guest speakers, of which I was one of them. I think I was the first or the second one, and they had to do a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. And she just wrote me a note, and she said, I started taking pictures of the slides so that you could see their feedback, but there were so many that I just stopped taking them. And I just wanted to let you know that there was one thing that you said that mattered to them the most. And it was, go where you are celebrated, not where you are tolerated.
Say that again. Say it one more
And
time.
go where you are celebrated, not where you are tolerated. And to get to have success in this life, where that's the kind of work that I get to do, where I get to say, hey, there's someplace out there that will celebrate you and that you'll feel celebrated. Go to that place. Life is too short. And one of the things I told him is, if you find yourself working for a bad boss, leave immediately. Because again, life is too short to work for a shitty boss. I don't know if I can say that on podcast, but it's true.
I think you can. I that's an interesting point right at the end there. I mean, the whole thing's interesting, but sometimes people know quickly. I think it was Angela McCullough, former FA executive, respected leader. I think I want to say it's her, but it sounds like something she would say. She mentioned she went somewhere and immediately knew, this is not the place for her. And rather than what a lot of people do is give it, I mean, you have to give it a little bit of time sometimes, but it's a little window. Some people wait too long. Next thing you know, it's 2-3 Christmases later and you're still there. And I always wonder why people work where they, places they hate. Of course, sometimes, hey, you got to pay the bills. There's a lot of things like that I can sympathize with. However, sometimes, why are you miserable? Like, you can make the choice.
Yeah.
You don't just leave and not have a plan if you have a family, but find somewhere. So that's interesting. And it sounds like you are a leader. I mean, you caring about what other people's success is really what leadership is all about, right? Is bringing up people around you. So it sounds like you have a really rewarding career. That's pretty cool.
I do. Very rewarding.
All right. And I asked Angela, and I asked every guest this, is to leave a question for the next guest, which I figured out where I stole this from. I did steal this from Diary of a CEO, which is a very famous podcast and YouTube show. So hopefully I don't get sued, but I don't think you can for this, but because it's a very insightful question. But the question is, leaving a question for the next person. Her question was, leadership can be extremely taxing. It's stressful, right? You're carrying a lot of weight in your role because you're caring about everybody else. And so, how do you, Trevor, personally recover so that you are there for those people?
Sure. There are several things. One, I am an introvert, which most people are shocked to find out. I have a very extroverted job, but I am an introvert. So I have lots of boundaries when it comes to work. For example, I only have a certain number of coaching slots available in a day. I don't go back to back. I have known people who they just go from one to, that's not me. I can't do it. So I have a set number, maximum number every day, which it means that I can maintain my mental health and well-being. And also it means that the last coaching session of the day, they're getting as much of me as the first person got every day. I do work at home. I do two things every day, however, to also provide some sanity to me. I get up and leave every day. I get dressed like I go to work. I leave. I go work at a coffee shop, but I start my day very intentionally. And my day ends at the same time every day, and I go to the gym. And that's a other form of a boundary for me so that I don't just keep working. And so leaving the house at the end of the day, and then also the exercise piece is hugely important. I talk about in the book, I talk about the role that anxiety plays, and great leaders, the role that great leaders play, are that they're good anxiety shields. That anxiety exists within me and exists around me, exists within the organizations that I work with, exists in your organization. Anxiety is a reality. The question is, how do we react to it? And so if I'm going to be a shield, meaning I'm not going to be a pass-through if I'm experiencing it, I'm not going to, make sure everybody else is. I'm not a conduit. I have a holding tank for that anxiety, but the holding tank isn't very big. So there has to be ways for me to get it out. So whether it's a grueling CrossFit workout at the end of every day, That can be one form of it for me. Or I also, on the other end of my day, I'm up at 5 a.m. every day and I spend the first hour of my day reading, which is also just a great outlet for me. So those are just some of the things that I do. Good question, Angela.
Yeah, Angela. And that's so routine, a way to release some of that anxiety. And that goes for everybody, not just leaders, right? But that's I've heard that a couple times too, is having that sort of that routine. There's a way for you to manage your emotions and your feelings and your brain, basically. So now let me ask you, if you wanted to leave a question, what would it be for the next guest? Which I don't know who it is yet. We have a list of them, but what is something you would ask another leader?
Sure. I would ask them, why do they lead? And I'll provide some context to it, and you could decide if you want to share that context with them or not. I think the why of leading is much more important than the who. We oftentimes think of leading as in who I lead. Oh, I lead this group of people. I lead this organization. I lead this company. But I think that the most effective leaders that I know why they lead. There's a why behind it. You heard me say mine a minute ago. I lead because I want to see people's lives changed. That's my why. I want to see improvement. I want them to experience something that they haven't experienced before. So I think the why of leading is super important. And getting people to grapple with that. Why do I lead? Why do I want to lead? And realizing that that's not an easy question to answer. I think, the longer you do it, probably the easier it is to answer that question. But I like posing it to people who are just starting out, because I think it's kind of a lifetime journey of answering it, to be honest with you. I think it goes through waves.
I would agree. That's a great question. One of our best. That's a really good one. So out of curiosity, since you've worked with, leaders from, I assume, many different types of levels, different types of organizations, one of my missions here is to pass on knowledge, right? Help create the next great leaders, and get to know people, right? All that stuff. But what kind of leader, and I mean, like, either type of person or job or level, would you like to see on the next on a future podcast? Because this is Trevor. We've had a lot of folks like you, a lot of not a lot of people that are professional coaches per se, except for some of the folks who also do coaching, like Angela and Tash. But a lot of former, very established executives. But is there a different type of person I should talk to? Because leadership isn't just the person that's 30 years in their career, right?
I'm going to answer a different question.
Great. Yeah, all right, that's great.
Here's the skills of being a coach for the last 20 years, is to answer a different question. I think what's interesting about some of the people that you have had on, in particular, Tash and Angela, is they're experiencing such a different aspect of leadership now than they have. I mean, to go from where they were in a large government agency into a totally different realm, the value I would think in having them on a podcast is to hear experientially how that's been different, the transition. How do you make that? Because that's a pretty profound change. Because for them, they're going from a highly hierarchical organizational structure, titles, authority, safety, and all of these things where your ability to lead is much more directly proportional to the authority given to you. They are positions of authority, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that that's bad. And they've probably really had to lean in. How do you go from leading by authority to leading by influence? And I think that that's a fascinating transition. I happen to think that leading by influence is a much more effective way of leading, even if you have a lot of authority to your job. The moment that you have to tell somebody you're the boss is the moment that you stopped really being the boss, because you just gave up any sort of influence and moral imperative that you had by claiming on the power and the authority by claiming you're the boss. So I think that's fascinating. So kudos to you, because I think that that's an interesting window into it. I am a huge advocate of trying to bring in the multiple generational voice of leading. Uh, I did a deal for the FAA a couple years ago for a room full of the 60 FAA executives. And we did a panel discussion where we brought in the 4 generations of people who were working in the FAA. We had one person from every generation. The FAA is a little different. There are actually 5 generations in the workforce today, but the FAA doesn't have it because they can, many of them can retire so early because they, were whatever. But we did a panel discussion just with 4 different generations and what their perspective was on working in the FAA. And quite frankly, the people who were the best in the panel were the youngest. Not because they were the most experienced, but because they just had such a radically different perspective in it. And so I think I would encourage you to have some find the youngest leaders that you can, which is sometimes an oxymoron, because sometimes when they're young, there's not much leading going. But bring in some younger leaders who have a different generational experience and perspective. You mentioned earlier the influence of social media, which has had such a profound impact. I think one of the biggest detrimental things that's ever happened is that we call people influencers now. Well, that's ridiculous. They're not influencers. They're attention getters. There's no influence going on, because the moment that they stop being interesting, guess what they cease being? They cease being influencers when they stop attracting audience, when they, when the trend moves on to something else, they're no longer influencers. Well, they weren't influencers to begin with. Influencers are influencers all the time. They're these people who, are just have, again, a profound impact. So it's a tragedy that we call people who, have a big follower influencers, because they're, I don't think that that's influence. I think, again, it's a lot of it's spectacle. A lot of it's, what crazy stuff can I say to gain more followers or whatever it may be. So it's had such a profound impact on it. And I think, quite frankly, it's, that you couple that with AI, and it just has made the task of developing and investing in younger leaders even more daunting. It's just really super hard. But here's what I know, and again, I shared this at the guest lecture that I did at the university. Here's what I know: no matter what role AI ends up playing, is AI cannot replace a leader in an organization.
That's good to know. No, but yeah, no,
Yeah,
100%.
just
100%.
No one wants their. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Maybe some people do, but I don't think a lot of people go, oh yeah, I want the CEO of the company I work for to be AI. So there will still be, in my humble professional opinion, there'll still be a need for leaders. There'll still be a need for people who are willing to lead. Yes, in a very technologically advanced world, a world where social media is provocative and prevalent and all of those things. But here's what I know is people still want to know that you care about them. They still want to know that you're kind and compassionate and empathetic, that you're human. That will be the most profound thing going forward. I talk about it in the book. I talk about the fact that we need people who are the human-kind leaders, not humankind, but human and kind. That's what will set us apart going forward.
I think the human, just being human, and is going to be a potentially a rare commodity that we're all going to start craving for, something where we probably take for granted now. I'm sure we do, but I mean, will I get one? What do I like? Espresso martini made by a robot? Yeah, it'd be cool one time, but then I don't want to go to a bar that's all robots, right? I mean, again, it's like a novelty, but that's not how we want to live our lives, I don't think. And I think that the human experience being near each other, it's like our history, right? From 50 million years ago, whenever the first type of human there was, we were together for safety, for other reasons,
Yeah.
and the concept of being one disconnected through COVID and stuff, and now through, I think we feel like we're connected through our phones, and in a way we are, but we're really not, right? We're still missing that human
Mhm.
interaction in person. There's nothing like having a person right there across from you or next to you, and
Mhm.
that'll become more important. Yes, AI could help us diagnose diseases faster and fix them faster, but you'd like to have a human tell you that and walk you through that and care for you?
Yeah.
Like, think of nursing. You mentioned it earlier. One of the most important jobs out there that doesn't get a lot of love is all a human-based thing. You don't want a robot to come in and do all that stuff. It can assist by doing something else,
Yeah.
but you still want a human. So yeah, you're
Yeah.
onto it, very onto it. Um,
Yeah.
well, Trevor, I think we can go on for hours and hours, and I'd like to. So I'm gonna have
We
you on
could for
again
sure.
if you're willing. And I know now you have to
Yeah.
say
I
yes.
would love that.
You have to say yes right now, right? Um,
But we can talk all about coaching.
yes, I want to get into that and more into this, the future kind of thing. But appreciate your time once again, Trevor Bron, accomplished and world-renowned both author and leadership coach. Your book is The Leadership Lie and the 6 Secrets of Great Leaders. Please buy that book. It helps you even as a human, just being a normal human for human interactions. And just real quick before you go, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to get your services and your input, Leader Core is your company. How do we find you?
Mm-hmm. Leader-core.com.
Easy enough.
Simple enough, or you can just Google my name. I think it's the first thing that comes up. So
Excellent.
I'm pretty easy to locate.
Well, hopefully somebody reaches out to you after this, because I think you can really help them. Thank you for taking the time.
From your world-renowned podcast.
Oh yeah. Me and my mom are listening. Hi, Mom. Maybe she'll reach out.
I'll get my mom to listen. So there we got
There
2
you go.
moms. We got
That's 4, and then I'm going to listen. I think maybe for half of it. But
there you go.
no, Trevor, again, thank you. For sharing your insights. You've got a lot to share, and I'd love to hear more about it. But I think it's a very interesting spin on the folks that I've talked to and the experiences. And there's a lot for you to share. I think you could write probably another few books if you wanted to. So appreciate your time, Trevor, and I hope to see you again soon.